Peace, 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 peace. My name is the original OG from OmegaFMRadio.co.uk, where we give you a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I greet you in the name of the Most High, whoever or whatever you call the Most High. I greet you with the universal languages of the words of peace. Peace, yo. What's the looking at the present situation that's going on in what they call the Middle East, with Israel, Iran, Lebanon, Gaza. What's going on? I've heard Joe Rogan, uh, Adam Smith, Mehdi Hassan, Candace Owens, all talking about what's taking place over there. Right? So I said, well, okay, there was a book put out back in the day, in the turn of the century, called The Prodigals of the Jewish Elders. How much validity did it have? Or does it have? Is the book fake or is it not? So I'm done the research, and I'm saying inquiry minds would like to know. I'm leaving it up to you. This is not about hate. This is not about discriminating against anybody. There is a disclaimer coming up. It's just about inquiry minds would like to know, especially what we see going on today in what they call the Middle East. So without no further ado, let's go.
One of the reasons why this was particularly notable for many people, that interaction that you had with Mike Huckabee, and the reason you in particular got so much pushback is because there is an enormous sensitivity around Israel being the homeland of the Jewish people and the attempt to delegitimize that.
I have enormous sensitivity about the United States being the homeland of my people and the burial place of my ancestors. I have enormous sensitivity about the future of the United States. Those are my concerns. I'm not dismissing the concerns of any other group, including Israelis or Iranians or Venezuelans or anybody else. Everybody has his or her own set of concerns, but my concerns revolve around my country. And so I'm not going to subordinate my concerns and the concerns of my children to other people's hysteria, no matter what country it is.
Why do you think you get tagged so often with anti-Semitism?
Because I think there are two reasons. One is I'm not an anti-Semite, and I think that's obvious. And I've expressed this many times, and I'll do so again, I have temperamental and religious objections to anti-Semitism or any hate or discrimination based on bloodline that is against Christian theology. It's against my personal ethics, and I oppose it no matter who is suffering from it, whether it's whites or blacks or Jews. Nobody can be punished for his bloodline, period. I don't believe in collective punishment, unlike the Israeli government. So that's number one. I am opposed to anti-Semitism, and that's a threat because I'm not approaching this as someone who wants to hurt Jews. I just don't want the United States to be implicated in the crimes of other nations, and I'm not intimidated. And number two, that is a much easier conversation than answering very simple questions like, where does the right to exist come from that Israel has, that I've been told for many years has a unique right globally to exist? Where does that right emanate from? Who granted that right and on what grounds? And they can't answer the questions, and they don't want to have the conversation. So just to be totally clear, asking questions is not hate. Telling the truth is not hate. And they don't want to answer the questions, and they don't want to tell the truth. And by the way, it's not just Jews. I think I've been attacked more viciously by Christian Zionists than I have by Jews, just in point of fact. It's a kind of nice universalism to it. But I'm not intimidated. I don't know why I would be. In fact, I think it's my obligation not to be intimidated.
Can asking questions, though, stir up hate? I mean, language is powerful.
Well, sure. I mean, you could pose attacks in the form of questions. I've certainly done that a lot, for sure. But the questions themselves hang in the air, and a legitimate question deserves an answer.
The reason I want to press on this a little bit more is that you know that there is an entire anti-Semitic worldview that has been based on the protocols of the elders of Zion, you know, that there is like this cabal of powerful Jews that controls the world. And, you know, that book was written in the early 20th century, but it, helped the Nazis, and it really has informed a lot of the views of many people today that there is, this very powerful sect of Jewish people who want global war and global conflict. And I think that there is a concern that I have, and a real concern. I don't mean this as something that people say to slander anyone, but just a real concern that the rhetoric where everything is blamed on Israel, where Israel has these supernatural powers almost to influence the president, to influence the previous president, George W. Bush, to enter into the Iraq War, to be involved in assassinations, et cetera, that it has echoes of that, and that people are genuinely concerned that it opens the door to this idea that has been debunked and has been used in, absolutely vicious ways to annihilate an entire people.
Today I'm talking about my favorite anti-Semitic book, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, the most controversial book in history. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a big deal, having an enormous impact upon the world since its publication in 1903. The Protocols refer to 24 uncovered documents detailing the operations and plans of
Universal Studios, 20th Century Fox, ABC News, CBS News, Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers, ESPN Sports, Fox News, Washington Post, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, MTV Music Television, Nickelodeon, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Comedy Central, NBC Entertainment, Google, what else do we have? Disney, ABC Kids and Family, YouTube, Los Angeles Times, Discovery Network, Paramount Pictures, Facebook, Huffington Post, Yahoo, Marvel, Hulu, Cosmopolitan, Time, Touchstone, Associated Press, Pixar, Miramax, HBO, New York Post, LucasArts, MSNBC, DreamWorks Animation. Now, the thing is, I skipped over maybe about 5 of them because it was just unclear on this list. The red are the executives that are Jewish.
the Jewish world power. The Protocols exposed their secret plan to take over the world by undermining all authority and setting up an autocracy to rule over the Gentiles. But before we get into just how damaging this book would become, let's take a look inside. The Jewish world power has been in place since ancient times, passed down through the generations. The act behind Gentile Front.
Stop telling people you're chosen. You are not chosen to do ish, except within the synagogue of Satan. Clearly, because everything you do, clearly, because everything you do, clearly, because everything you do. There is a Israeli historian named Abraham Pollock, and there's actually a lot of historians prior to World War II, who received awards for saying that the origins of, which is why it was stunning to me to see Kyrie Irving treated in the way that he was treated, 6 steps to get back to your life, because he shared a documentary which was theorizing that the original Jews, I actually didn't watch the end of the documentary, but the point was he was making that documentary suggested that the people that are inhabiting Israel today are not the biblical Jews. That was the point of why he got into trouble. I cannot tell you one way or another. I have not gone into any anthropological research. What I can tell you is that prior to World War II, and you again can pivot to your browser right now and look up a man named Abraham Pollock, okay, prior to World War II, he extensively wrote about, and the Israeli historians extensively wrote about the fact that they were the Khazars. They were like, yeah, here's the evidence, blah, blah, blah. He received awards from Tel Aviv University. And then suddenly after World War II, they said to him, like, this research was not helpful, and they just stopped printing his book.
4 positions of power. The Protocols claimed that no American presidency has existed without the influence from this Jewish elite. The Gentile fronts remain to deceive the public until the time is right to seize power. To reach their end goal of a Jewish-led autocracy, the Protocols lay a plan to manipulate the Gentile proletariat into thinking and acting on behalf of the Jewish people. To garner support, the Protocols outlined raising wages, but only to secretly raise the prices of prime necessities as well, and then planting seeds of anarchy, encouraging the use of alcohol and pushing for revolution. At the same time, the Jewish elite should be creating huge monopolies and colossal reservoirs of wealth, upon which the Gentiles and government will be dependent. Land will be controlled as much as possible, and then by raising taxes and mortgage debt, create complete dependence from the land user.
In case you're not familiar at all with who the Khazars are, outside of whether or not you can draw a line from the Khazar Empire, the Khazarian Empire, my understanding, and I have not done enough research into it, essentially it was an empire. And can you fact check it again? This would be in Ukraine, and what would be modern Ukraine? And let me know in my ear when you dig that up, Mark.
We're checking.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that it was in what would have been deemed modern Ukraine. It all goes back to Ukraine. But essentially, they were worshiping and doing things that were considered so immoral and so corrupt. And I'm talking about sexual stuff. And I'm also talking about in the way that they cheated people, that they were given an option from modern, I would say Iran, but Persia and Russia, like either you convert to one of the faiths that we think will make you more moral, or we will crush you. And so there was this mass conversion in the 8th century, and you can fact check me on that too. I think it was the 8th century where the Khazarians mass converted to Judaism as the faith. And to be clear, it was the people that were running this empire at the top who were just up to no good, and they carried on their corruption. They carried on their sexual deviancy despite pretending to have converted to Judaism. That doesn't mean the people that they ruled over didn't meaningfully convert. I'm sure they did, but the people at the top didn't. And so Russia and I'm saying Iran because my brain is not doing. Russia and Persia teamed up and crushed the Khazarian Empire. And so there has been a theory for a while that what is happening is that the Khazarians are reassembling, and that essentially they want to crush Russia and Iran, which is kind of happening right now, actually, which is interesting to think about. I hadn't even thought about that until right now, that the elites do seem to really want war with Russia and Iran.
At this point, the government can crash, and I quote, "The Gentiles will bow before us to obtain the right to existence." Upon recovering the protocols, the editor pointed to them as proof of Jews being behind the destruction of all nations. It was Jews who were behind the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, and even World War I, because wars are the Jews' harvest. The mental gymnastics the editor uses to prove his point are frankly quite insane. Let's take their explanation of World War I, for example, and how the Jews caused that. So what was the cause of World War I? Nationalism. And nationalism was a reaction against Napoleon. Napoleon was the antagonist of the French Revolution. The French Revolution was the consequence of the German Reformation. The German Reformation was based upon a crude Christianity, and this Christianity was invented by the Jews. So, by the transitive property, the Jews created World War I. The editor even goes on to plead with the reader that he's not joking, as if to wink that he knows how insane he sounds.
The Canaanites were a brutal and a wicked culture. They frequently engaged in behavior that was considered obviously immoral and decadent, right? A list of the sins that Israel was told to avoid at all costs. Those sins included the Canaanites partook in incest, in child sacrifice, in homosexuality, and in bestiality. Now in your mind, you're going, okay, that sounds familiar. We spoke about this as well when I was telling you guys about the Khazarian kingdom. And I think somebody asked a question yesterday, like, oh, do you know about the Khazars? And I had mentioned to you that, yes, I'm very aware, by the way, because I think that is what was mentioned also in that documentary that Kyrie Irving shared, was that for a period of time, a lot of Israeli historians were writing books and receiving awards for having traced their lineage to the Khazars. A very similar story with that kingdom before it was crushed by Russia and Persia.
But unfortunately, he's dead serious. Jews were going to take over the world, and would do so through socialism and leftist policies. And many of their plans were already in place, but it wasn't too late as long as he could expose them. As you can see, the protocols are pretty nuts. So how popular could they become? The Russian Revolution of 1917 saw the overthrow of the Russian Empire. The Tsars who practiced serfdom were displaced by the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, who preached Marxism. Karl Marx, was Jewish, and Russian Jews had participated in the Russian Revolution, and this was all the supporters of the Tsar needed to quickly spread the theory that the Bolsheviks were largely controlled by the Jews, despite Jews making up only a small minority of the party. This made sense though, because even during the 19th century, anti-Semitism from the Tsars was rampant. They believed Jews could never fully assimilate into Russian culture and were therefore a threat to patriotism. To discredit the Bolsheviks, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion began being circulated. It uncovered the blueprint for Jewish world domination that had already brought down the Russian Empire. And by 1920, the Protocols had spread to Great Britain, being published in the Morning Post, and America falling into the hands of Henry Ford. Ford was a well-known anti-Semite. He was sold on the Jewish conspiracy and took it upon himself to spread the word. Ford's own newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, published the Protocols under the title, The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. The article was so successful that it was later published as a book, selling.
I encourage my audience to go back to this Frankist cult, right? So there was this person who was perceived to be the Messiah. He was a Kabbalist. Estimated from half to 3/4 of the Jews in Europe followed him, believing that he was the Messiah. So one of the things that they practice is that we'll inherit the world if we practice incest. So everyone is in our tribe and we keep multiplying. And to initiate yourself into this cult, you had to practice pedophilia. If you try to look online today, they tell you, well, this cult died off. That is an insane, easily debunkable lie, because our Supreme Court justice, the first Jewish, he wasn't Jewish, he was clearly a Kabbalist, Louis Brandeis in America, was a Frankist. And he kept in the Supreme Court a picture of Ava Frank, who was their non-Virgin Mary, because they believed in having sex all the time. And there was this initiation rite. Being a gypsy is also a piece of this religion. Like, become who you need to become and always write yourselves as the victims in history. This is the point of these endless wars. They're smashing people, pulling them out of their homes. I mean, what will happen? I like to think about this Gaza because this is a current event, right? We see what's happening. We know what's happening. What are they going to say in the future about the Gazans? Are these people, what happens to their remaining belongings? What happens to their ancestry? Do these people go in and take their belongings, these settlers that are running into there, and sell them in a foreign country? This is what I always think about the Bolshevik Revolution. You stole Christian art. You stole Christian jewelry. You mass murdered 60+ million Christians. And then you exported yourself to America, and you started the Diamond District. That's a fact, by the way. Okay, that is a fact that this is what they did. If you want to look up the history of Armand Hammer's family, the actor, his great, however many grandfather, Julius Hammer and Armand Hammer, by his same name. He was close with Stalin. He was close with Lenin. And he would go and he would take arts and all of these artifacts while Christians were being oppressed, and he would start museums, and they established the Diamond District. So you're being told, oh, well, we're just so clever that everywhere we go, we just are able to start these businesses despite being, treated like crap, and we're surviving the pogroms. I reject that, okay? You've been more evil. And I'm talking here about the Bolsheviks who whitewashed their name and their history and gave themselves new identities. You've been successfully more evil in being willing to mass murder 60 million people, writing yourself out of the textbooks for having done this, and stealing from the people whose land you take. Will that be the story of Gaza? Presumably some of these people had family heirlooms, had diamonds, had things. What happens to all of their stuff? Do we think these settlers go try to give it back to them? Think in the now and how much we're being lied to. Think in the now of what's going to happen to this family, these families that left all of this stuff in Gaza. And you will certainly come to terms with what's been happening all over the world, okay? It's not that anyone is more exceptional in terms of their intelligence. It's that we have groups that are more exceptional in terms of their capacity for evil and perversion. And that is how I see Bibi Netanyahu and any person that defends the modern state of Israel after we are watching this Holocaust happen live. You have a capacity for lies, manipulation, and evil that most don't hold.
500,000 copies in the US and translated into several languages. The book made its way into the hands of none other than Adolf Hitler, who relied heavily on the text as justification for his anti-Semitic plans, pointing to it as proof that Jews were behind Germany's economic hardships. The Protocols were referenced in his speeches and in his book, Mein Kampf. So yes, Henry Ford had a part to play in the Holocaust. He was greatly respected by the German people, and was the only American mentioned by Hitler in Mein Kampf, calling him the only great man in America maintaining full independence from the Jews. All the violence and hate spawned from this book, all the anti-Semitism it grew, were based upon absolutely nothing. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is entirely fictitious. In 1964, the US Senate reported that the Protocols were fabricated. A Russian court in 1993 examined all the evidence, heard from countless experts, and also determined that there was no truth to the protocols. In fact, 60% of the book was lifted from a political French satire entitled Dialogues in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. But to this day, the protocols are widely circulated, being required literature for neo-Nazis and Holocaust deniers. In parts of the world, particularly in the Middle East, the protocols can even be found in schools. In 2002, Egypt ran a 30-part miniseries based upon the protocols on its government-sponsored television channel. But despite being a complete fabrication, there are those out there who believe deeply in the protocols. And if you take one thing from this slice of history, just don't be a dumbass and fact-check. We are in the glorious age of alternative facts, and we need to be vigilant. Depressingly, 86% of Americans who read news articles on social media do not fact-check what they read. And even more concerning, even if they did want to fact-check, 24% of Americans are unaware of what steps they'd need to take to do so. 46% are only somewhat confident that they actually could. Media outlets have biases, this is well known, and some are extremely nefarious in how they manipulate information. But for right now, all you gotta do is just keep yourself skeptical.
Speaking about what was in the Talmud, they want to punish your offspring, they view you as Gentiles, they believe in spilling your blood. Bibi Netanyahu and any person that defends the modern state of Israel, you have a capacity for lies, manipulation, and evil. The rabbis, the police, the politicians have been involved. They are saying that as a part of a ritual, 3-year-old children are being raped in forests. To initiate yourself into this cult, you had to practice pedophilia. There was actually a synergy that was building amongst Europeans because there were these incidences that were happening where children were going missing. Why does Israel have such an issue extraditing people that are raping children in America? They protect these people. You are being gaslit right now about what's happening in Gaza. So you better believe that these people are gaslighting you about what took place all across.
Make your decision for you to think it through intellectually. Remember what I said? Think before you think, before you think. Anyway, you can hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I am the original OG from OmegaFMRadio.co.uk, where we give you a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So with that, it's a great app. Catch you on the rebound. Hello, one piece.